Tall Tale TV. Of Monsters and Mushrooms by Lesley Herron. Chapter 6, Foliota.
Okay. Would you rather?
Attila paused, pressing his face against the cold bars of his cell door.
Have a turnip for a head or potatoes for feet?
The three of them had been separated into different cells and spent their days and nights whittling away the boredom with silly games. The first couple of nights, the questions were sane and logical. Things that could happen in normal circumstances, like, would you rather lose your right hand or your left foot? Vel didn't find that one amusing. But now, after many nights, it had become sort of a competition to see who could ask the dumbest questions. Eric leaned his head back against the stone wall of his cell. After a moment deep in thought, he let out a soft chuckle and replied,
Potatoes for feet, because if they got dirty, I could call them mud spuds.
His chuckle turned into outright barks of laughter at his own terrible joke. Vel, locked in the middle cell, dragged his mechanical hand down his face in anguish. He had not joined them in playing the game. Not once had he answered their absurd questions. Yet despite that, any minute now, they would repeat the question to him, as if he hadn't heard it the first time, or that he had shown any interest in the game whatsoever. Perhaps if all the cities out there used this tactic of torture, no one would commit another crime, anywhere, ever again.
Vel! Turnip or potatoes?
Attila called out, tapping the front of his boots against the metal bars to get his friend's attention. Vel rolled his eyes.
I've told you, I don't even know how many times today that I am not playing.
If he had known this was how it was going to be, he would have left his brother and the idiot in the forest to be eaten by that Caranthium.
Turnip, Eric muttered.
Vel couldn't decide if his brother was answering the question for him or if it was an insult. He rolled his eyes, unable to keep his temper any longer.
Sure, because then I wouldn't have ears, and I wouldn't have to listen to you two and your dumb game of questions,
he snapped. Attila, who was busy thinking of the next riddle, didn't seem to notice Vel's response. He stifled a chuckle when he finally piped up.
Would you rather be insanely popular with the ladies, but constantly grumpy, or single and always happy?
Ew.
Eric pulled a face at the question as he shook his head.
Single?
Vel gripped the bars of his cell with both hands and could feel the metal crunch gently against the pressure of his mechanical one. These questions, in all their unfathomable stupidity, were not good for his head. His migraine had flourished into a constant, dull ache, throbbing against his skull. Perhaps if he tried to escape, the guards would do the humane thing and put him out of his misery.
All right, I got one. Would you rather have cavefish for breakfast every day for the rest of your life, or just one more jar of gummies?
Eric asked, unable to wipe the smile from his face. Attila responded with a long, drawn-out groan.
Ugh,
Vel began, moving to the other side of his cell.
Don't bring up the damn gummies.
He wrinkled his nose before using the back of his hand to cover his face.
It still smells like fruit punch in here.
I don't want to play this game anymore, Attila whined. After consuming several pounds of gummy fruits just prior to getting locked up, he had experienced the unforeseen consequences of a high-fiber diet. The single bucket in the corner had been nowhere near adequate. The sound of Eric's laughter was not loud enough to mask the sound of Attila dry-heaving in the corner of his cell. Vel looked down at his mechanical hand. His brain began to calculate the exact force needed to drive one of his fingers through his own skull.
Step away from your doors,
boomed a voice from the doorway. Eric looked over to see Frankie lumbering in. His fat fingers fiddled with his ring of keys.
Hey, Frankie! How's it going?
Frankie ignored the question as he jammed a key into Attila's door first, unlocking it. He then did the same for the other two.
Keep your mouths shut and follow me,
he snarled as he led the way down a different corridor.
Where are we going?
Eric asked, keeping his distance.
I said keep your mouth shut.
The air steadily grew colder as Frankie led them farther down into the very bowels of the world pillar. They passed empty hallways with faded portraits, locked and barred doors, several spiraling stairwells that seemed to lead to nowhere, and through an amphitheater-sized room filled with an army of jewel-encrusted skeleton statues. They continued down several flights of stairs and past several heavily guarded rooms before Frankie finally stopped at an extremely old and ornate door. Judging by the grin on his face, this was probably the gallows. He pushed against the door and shoved the others inside. It was not, in fact, the gallows, or even a dungeon. They stepped out into an indoor forest, a landscape cleverly fashioned to hide the edges of the room from view and give it an illusion of never ending. The ceiling disappeared above them, and the darkness there was broken only by tiny pinpricks of light. Leafless trees towered over them, each branch draping long, thorn-filled vines across the ground, which was covered with a colorless grass. The landscape was dotted with various species of shrubberies, each one similarly lacking pigment, save for their glittering iridescent berries. It was like a charcoal drawing brought to life. There was even a pair of featherless albino birds. They strutted by, their heads and tails held high, as if they were insulted by the presence of colors in their forest. The reason for their sudden impromptu walk through the woods became apparent. Sitting in a dainty metal chair at an even daintier table was Lola. Her red velvet suit was a vibrant display of color among the monochrome tones of the forest. At the sight of them, she got to her feet and approached Frankie.
Ah, Franklin, you have arrived. I was beginning to wonder if perhaps they were giving you hard times.
Frankie tried to hide the childish smile that appeared on his face.
Oh, no, miss. They were no trouble.
Lola offered the guard a mischievous grin at his words. She placed 2 of her 4 hands on either side of Frankie's face, tapping them gently.
Oh, good.
She leaned in and kissed him on each cheek. It was more of a lick than a kiss, really.
Thank you, Franklin. You may wait outside. I will call you when we are done.
Frankie nodded and retraced his steps out of the forest, trying desperately to hide the deep shade of maroon his face had turned. He stepped out of sight and just beyond earshot. Attila could swear he heard a high-pitched giggle coming from that direction. Lola turned her attention back to the 3 as she reclaimed her seat. Her syrupy manner dropped as she said,
"Sit."
Attila and Eric hesitantly dropped into the tiny metal chairs. Vel, however, remained standing, his hands folded before him. He studied her, calculating exactly what her reason for scheduling this visit might be. More importantly, he was silently working out an escape plan or 2.
Why are we here?
He asked, his voice breaking the silence at last. The featherless birds gave loud, shrill whistles before they fled into the depths of the forest.
I said sit,
Lola ordered, returning Vel's icy glare with one of her own. Even Vel couldn't match Lola's glare. He relented, falling into the last fragile chair. Lola picked up an ancient-looking ceramic cup, lapping at its contents gently before turning her attention to Attila. There was that mischievous smile on her muzzle again.
Ah, Mishka, I have managed to get you counsel before Madame Whisper.
Vel narrowed his eyes.
Why would you do that?
Lola gave Vel a short sniff before huffing in his direction.
I do not like him. He asks far too many questions,
she told Attila as her cold stare remained locked with Vel's. Attila gave a nervous chuckle.
Well, he grows on you, but, if you don't mind my saying so, how did you manage that? And also, who is Madame Whisper?
Lola set her cup down.
I forget that you dwell on the surface. The Madam is ruler of the underworld. For 300 years, the city has known only the cruel hands of tyrants. But when Madam arrived, she took down the oppressors, and the city has known peace since. I have known her ever since, and she has known my family for even longer. And I have asked her, just for you, my Mishka, to personally see to your case.
Lola patted Attila's knee affectionately.
She has agreed.
Oh,
Attila exclaimed, his face lighting up.
Does that mean she'll let us go?
Vel gave a half-hearted laugh. Lola shrugged, picking up her cup again, her eyes flickering back towards Vel.
I suppose that depends on you. Just don't let the angry idiot speak for you.
Vel clenched his jaw. Crime boss or not, no one speaks to him that way. He opened his mouth to respond, but received a sharp kick to his shin from Eric's direction. Attila beamed.
Wow, Lola, thank you. How can I ever repay you?
Next time you are down here, you invite Lola. She will bring many gummies to feed you as you tell her your tales.
Perhaps it was because wolves are partially colorblind, but Lola didn't seem to notice the shade of green that Attila's face had turned. He nodded his head furiously while keeping his hand pressed against his mouth.
Oh,
he stated, his voice muffled against his hand.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I can't wait.
His words were forced, as if each word took a great amount of effort to say.
Franklin, you may take them from me now,
Lola called, waving down the guard. Frankie emerged from the shadows.
You come see me after this, and perhaps we can share some company, and perhaps some dessert.
Back into the heart of the pillar once more, down another abandoned corridor, and finally up a teetering flight of stairs before they stopped at a large golden door. Frankie pushed against it, and it creaked slowly open, the sound echoing around them.
You will not speak unless spoken to. You will limit your questions. If you make any wrong moves or unwanted actions, the court will end you,
Frankie directed, his baritone voice rattling the dust around him. He shoved them into the room, one by one, and shut the door behind them. The room was long and devoid of any noticeable wall fixtures or decorations, with an extremely high ceiling. The floor was a bare and unvarnished marble, save for a rich purple runner, layered in dust that ran the length of the room. It stopped 2 feet in front of a towering golden chair. The throne looked as if it had been made from the remains of a graveyard and then dipped in gold. A story was carved into each gilded bone, with details of serpents and sun gods laid with gems and jewels. On either side of the throne were 2 large onyx statues carved into the forms of colossal skeletons. One was blindfolded and held a set of scales in one hand and a dagger in the other. The other had a hand clasped around a large snake and wielded a sword. Most curious of all, Attila thought, was the limp figure propped up in the seat of the golden throne. Another skeleton, draped in a fine gauze, as if to keep the ancient bones together. It was adorned with fine linen armor, a towering gold headdress, and glittering jewelry. I guess you could say it's dead in here, Eric said over a giant grin.
That's 2,
Vel replied through grit teeth. He had a worried look in his eye, and a chill apparent on his skin from the sheen of cold sweat. He knew what was coming.
What is this? Is this like some automated justice system?
Attila asked, leaning forward to get a better look at the skeleton. Vel turned on his heel in response to a rustle on the runner from behind them. The others couldn't see her, but he could. He watched Madam Whisper, completely unaware that he could see her, effortlessly glide towards her skeletal body. The other 2 might have noticed a gentle rush of air, or perhaps even the ripple of her linen armor. But Vel didn't call it out to them. He didn't need anyone else knowing what he could see. He said nothing as he watched the goddess of the deep slip into her body as if she were merely zipping up a coat.
Who among you speaks for the others?
A voice like a chill wind across an endless stormy sea reverberated off the walls. Attila and Eric ceased their chattering to look upon the pile of bones. No longer a pile, Madam Whisper was sitting upright, with her hands folded in front of her. Her joints creaked with every jarring movement, and the fabric of her linen armor moved on an eerie wind that no one felt. The rumors were true. Vel stared past the bones at the creature within. She was not a creature of the other world, not an undulating mass of shadow or a bug-like entity. But she did share their talent for invisibility in this dimension. She defied the conventions of form itself. If Vel had to describe her, it would be the shape of tempered rage.
Hello, bone, lady?
Attila said shakily, taking his hat off in respect. Vel buried his face in his mechanical hand with a low groan. An audience with the most ruthless, bloodthirsty ruler the Underworld had ever seen, and they had Attila as their spokesman.
My name's Attila. I think my friend Lola talked to you?
Madam Whisper stood. Her body moved in uneven, jerking motions, like a poorly constructed marionette that had lost some of its strings. She towered over them, the tallest point of her golden headdress scraping the ceiling. Her spine gave two mighty snaps as she lowered herself at the waist to come eye to eye socket with Attila.
Ah, yes, the great slayer of the 40.
Vel had to give Attila credit. He didn't even flinch. He may have paled a shade or two, but he kept his lopsided smile in place.
Yep, that's me,
Attila replied, his voice trembling.
Slayed all 40. Well, 20. My razor bear handled the rest, sort of.
Vel closed his eyes and exhaled slowly through his nose. This would not end well. Madam Whisper reached out and grasped Attila's poncho between her two bony digits, inspecting the fabric closely.
You are not what I expected.
She let the fabric drop and slowly began to circle him.
But to be fair, the lady has never sent me someone who did not meet my needs.
Attila couldn't decide if he had been complimented, insulted, or served up like a dessert.
And, what might those needs be?
The grinning skull gave a rattling laugh, like a dry wind over sun-baked sand.
Yes, she did say you were different. Where most would tremble, you jest. Where most would beg for mercy, you speak your mind.
Or he's just an idiot,
Vel blurted out before he realized what he was doing. As soon as the words left his lips, he regretted it. Eric gave him a desperate, "What the hell?" look as he backed away. Madam Whisper spun on Vel, her true form swirling and frothing within her surrogate body. She straightened up to her full height, the light of the room dimming as she blocked it out.
Your servants are ill-mannered. Shall I reprimand this one by disemboweling him?
Whoa, servant?
Vel bristled, his brow arching in disbelief.
I am no one's servant.
The two onyx skeletal guardians sprung to life, their massive stone bodies creaking with the effort to move themselves across the room. And before any of them could register what was going on, two very real and very sharp swords were pressed against Vel's neck. The skeleton queen beamed with delight. Eric gave his brother a pleading look.
Dude, just keep quiet. You're gonna get us killed,
he whispered angrily. Attila stepped between Vel and Madam Whisper.
No. That's okay. He needs his bowels. Besides, if you kill him, I'd have to go find another servant. And who has the time for that?
He chuckled nervously.
Am I right?
He gave her a pleading look.
Very well. He may live, but your servants shall return to their cells.
She snapped her fingers with a sound like the breaking of a massive branch. The two guardians withdrew their swords and returned to their prior resting posts as Frankie entered the room.
I will make you this offer, little slayer. Come join me in my chambers, and we shall discuss what services you may render unto me to regain your freedom.
Attila scratched at his eye patch nervously.
I'm good. Thank you, though.
Another resounding crack echoed throughout the room as Madam Whisper cocked her head.
Do you mean to deny me?
Vel grabbed Attila by the poncho, tugging on the fabric hard, and hissed into his ear.
If you don't do this, I will...
Kill me, right? I'm sorry, man, but no. I'm not into sylphs.
Attila pried his poncho from Vel's hand and straightened it out. Eric grabbed Attila's other shoulder.
Come on, man. Would you rather sleep with a giant skeleton for one night, or spend the rest of your life in a jail cell?
Attila sighed. There was no use arguing with the Would You Rather game. This is part 6 of an ongoing series by Lesley Herron. Of Monsters and Mushrooms is a crossover fanfiction of a project in the works by author J.D. Wiley. She took a couple of his characters and combined them with some of her own.
I thank you for bearing witness to my tale, but it is far from over. If you should desire the chance to hear more, then subscribe. I am Madam Whisper, and that is all for today's Tall Tale TV.